Chris Drury lays out his expectations for the season, and the Rangers play a hockey game and win. The Ranger rookies defeating the Flyer rookies by a score of 4-2 in an impressive first game of the two-game series. All this and much more on today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 899 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Let's try that one more time. We are free and available on all platforms. And so, a lot to do in today's episode, kind of a jam-packed show here. We've got Chris Drury. Obviously, he met with the media the other day and going to have some takeaways from, what he said during those sessions. I'm going to start today's episode with that. Also going to be taking a look at the Rangers rookies defeating the Flyer rookies 4-2. Nice come-from-behind win. Rangers lost both of those games last year to the Flyers when the rookies played each other. So nice to see them picking up a victory here, and they're going to play again on Saturday. As of this recording, it's late Friday night, and so they still have one more game to go, once again, as of this recording. But we'll start with Chris Drury and some of the more interesting takeaways that I thought, from his session with the members of the media. He was asked about Blake Wheeler, and he said that, as soon as Wheeler was bought out by the Jets, there was almost immediately mutual interest from both sides. I think a lot of us could probably figure that out. Obviously the Rangers, we've talked about this a million times, but they did not have cap space and they have kind of a hole at right wing. So it made sense to go to Blake Wheeler and see if he wanted to come in and, play a role for the Rangers, obviously holding it down on the right wing. The phrase that Drury used when talking about, trying to get Blake Wheeler to come to New York was all hands on deck. It sounds like, obviously, Drury was involved in this process. So too was Peter Laviolette. So too was Jacob Trouba, obviously now the captain of the New York Rangers, and, several years ago was on the Winnipeg Jets, where Blake Wheeler was the captain. And by all accounts, those two are really close. I know that the Rangers did those series of getting to know you videos for some of the new players, and Blake Wheeler was one of them. And he mentioned that, Trouba is his favorite Ranger, something like that, that the question might have been phrased a little bit differently. But he did give a shout out to Jacob Trouba, his former and soon to be again teammate. Drury also, really put over Blake Wheeler by saying that he, quote, wasn't chasing every last dollar. And that's something that I've kind of talked about in this podcast as well. Blake Wheeler, he could have gotten more than 1 year, $800K. But the bottom line, he is getting, some of the buyout money from the Jets this year. And this guy has certainly made his money over the years. And he wanted to come to New York and chase the Stanley Cup. And that's what he's going to end up doing. Drury also mentioned that Wheeler, once again, really wanted to come to New York and that they are thrilled that he did. Moving right along here, another big talking point was if the Rangers have enough, muscle/grit to get it done in that department this season. And this is what Drury had to say about it. I think we do. Wheeler plays hard. Pitlick plays hard. Jimmy's certainly transformed his game to play harder. He's talking about Jimmy Vesey there. We know what Goody does. Bonino is not scared of the greasy areas of the game. I think we do have a lot of pieces that can play like that, and we'll push our skill guys to play like that as well. And, for all the talk that the Rangers, they don't have enough grit, they don't have enough toughness, et cetera, I decided to go back and look at, where they stood last year in terms of hits around the league. Now, I realize hits is not the only way to measure physicality or the willingness to do some of the dirty work out there, but it is a good place to start. And the Rangers last year, 32 teams in the NHL, they were number 9 with 1,907 hits. A more physical team than I think they're often given credit for. Something else that I found interesting about this, looking up these stats, there were obviously then 8 teams that finished in front of the Rangers, in the hits category this past season. And to go in order of those teams from 1 to 7, I had the Senators at number 1, then the Penguins, Predators, Flyers, Islanders, Coyotes, Canucks, and Caps. How many of those 7 teams made the playoffs last year? Well, that would be 1. That was the New York Islanders. They didn't even clinch until the last day of the regular season. And then, of course, they got knocked out in the first round by the Canes. And to look at the other side of that, let's look at the 8 remaining teams in the playoffs last year. So basically, the 8 teams that got out of the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs this past season, they were the Panthers, Leafs, Canes, Devils, Kraken, Stars, Knights, and Oilers. Out of those teams, as far as hits are concerned, this is where they ranked amongst the 32 teams in the NHL. The Panthers were 25th, the Leafs were 23rd, Canes were 30th, the Devils were 29th, the Kraken 22nd, the Stars 26th, Knights were 12th, the Oilers were 15th. So of the final 8 teams remaining in the playoffs this past season, only 2 of them had more than average in terms of hits, compared to the other teams in the league. And none of those teams were even in the top 10. I know physicality is important, and I know obviously you get to the playoffs and it's that much more, a part of the game. And obviously, a big part of hockey is imposing your will on your opponent. But I did just want to point that out that A, the Rangers are a more physical team than people often give them credit for. And B, it's not the end all be all. It is important. And obviously it's a critical component of your team. But I do feel like there's some fans out there who think that, the Stanley Cup just goes to the team that has the most hits at the end of the season. That's obviously not the case. And, with Drury here, I realize he's not just talking about hitting when he's talking about grit and, whatever word you want to use, sandpaper, grit, toughness, nastiness, whatever adjective you want to use or whatever noun you want to use in some cases to describe it. He's not just talking about hitting. He is talking about, guys that are willing to go to the tough parts of the rink, battle for loose pucks, play physical. But all those things kind of go hand in hand. And I do think, with some of the players that Drury mentioned, not to mention, he didn't even mention some of the defensemen, guys like Trouba and Lindgren and Schneider. They're going to go out there and throw their weight around. I think the Rangers have plenty of physicality, plenty of toughness to go around. Are they at the absolute top of the league in that department? I mean, probably not, without going through the other 31 rosters. But, I think they're up there a lot higher than a lot of people realize. And I don't think a lack of toughness, a lack of grit, lack of sandpaper, or any of those words that we want to use, I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue for the New York Rangers this upcoming season. But obviously, we will see how it all shakes out. I want to also talk about some other comments that Chris Drury made in just a second. He talked about, he talked about a lot of things, and we've obviously already covered some of them. But he talked about Artemi Panarin and his rough playoff showing this past season. Also talked about Brennan Othmann a little bit, specifically the possibility of him possibly opening the season with the New York Rangers. I don't look for that to happen, but it sounds like the door is at least open. And we're going to discuss all that good stuff and a whole bunch of other things as well in just a second. First, though, got to let everybody know, today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season has already kicked off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. All right, we just want to go ahead. Thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And for the everydayers, you guys are definitely going to want to stick around. As of this recording, if you're listening on audio, there's a good chance that the second rookie game between the Rangers and Flyers has already happened. But, we might as well spread this out. We might as well take our time with it. And I'm going to break down the second game of those 2 games in greater detail in our next episode. And also going to be doing a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Definitely want to line up some more guests for you guys between now and the start of the season. But for right now, we're going to get to game 1 between the Rangers and Flyers a little bit later in this episode. But I did want to take a couple more minutes, talk about some other takeaways from this Chris Drury meeting with the media. I don't know if it was really a press conference. It sounds like he just met with some media members. But regardless, here's something that we've talked about a little bit on here, a concept that we've gone back to from time to time when trying to figure out, who's going to play with who and who's going to be in the top 6 this year and who's going to be on the power play and all that good stuff. So obviously a little bit of an imbalance with the Rangers. They are loaded at left wing. First of all, with Kreider, Panarin, Lafreniere, then you've also got prospects coming along like Othman and Cooley. But Drury was asked about the possibility of both Lafreniere and Brennan Othmann potentially playing right wing this upcoming season, and this is what he had to say to it. He pretty much deferred to Peter Laviolette. This is what Drury had to say. The lineup card is Lavies. I know Laff and Othman, as of Wednesday, have publicly said they were comfortable on the right. I'm anticipating in training camp they'll get every chance to play on the right and show what they can do. And I'm all for that. I think training camp for sure. And also, you got 6 preseason games. You might as well, mix things up a little bit and experiment a little bit and see who's clicking with who. And can this guy play right wing? Can this guy be in the top 6? This, that, and the other thing. You guys know the drill. The preseason is time to kind of experiment with things and just kind of see what works and what doesn't really work. And I think for sure, Lafreniere in the past under Gerard Gallant has played right wing, but it's only been in like kind of short spurts. And really, you watch Lafreniere play right wing over the past couple of seasons. I've mentioned this in the past before as well, but there's no noticeable drop off in his game going from left wing to right wing. Initially when they drafted him, I thought, no, generational talent or whatever phrases they were using to describe him. Obviously, one of the better players to be available in the draft in a long time. To me, the last thing you want to do is change positions on him. But when he's played right wing, honestly, he's played some of his better hockey there. I mentioned how there was a short-lived line where from left to right it was Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere this past season. I thought the 3 of them looked pretty good together. There was one, highlight reel goal where Lafreniere was circling behind the net, made a ridiculous backhand pass across the ice. Really had to thread the needle, got it to Panarin, and Panarin scored. Just one example. But yeah, I mean, again, there is a little bit of a logjam at left wing and a little bit of an imbalance between left wing and right wing. So if Lafreniere and also Othman, if they're ready, willing, and able to play the right side, then that's awesome. That's good to hear that these guys are selfless and that they're willing to do that. With Othman, it's obviously a little bit different because, he hasn't even made his NHL debut yet. But Drury talked about Othman in a little bit more detail. And Othman has played some right wing in the OHL, just for anybody wondering about that, although left wing is his more natural position. But Drury did not rule out Othman making the opening night roster. He mentioned to Drury that he's hopeful for some quote-unquote good surprises. And he went on to say that maybe he's one of them, obviously referring to Brennan Othmann. And a trend that I've picked up on over the last few seasons, I'm sure a lot of you guys have as well, is that the Rangers, when they have their young players and they start to feel that, okay, this guy's ready, they tend to give them a chance. We've seen a lot of players skip the AHL entirely. Lafreniere and Kakko both skipped the AHL. We could debate if maybe they could have used a little bit of seasoning there, but they felt they were ready. Keandre Miller was in the lineup when he was 20. Braden Schneider was like 20, I think, 19. I think he was 20 when he made his NHL debut with the Rangers a couple of seasons ago here. But yeah, I mean, Zach Jones, he's another example. I think he was 21 when he debuted. And there's examples up and down the lineup. Obviously, the kid line in general. Philip Hedl, when he debuted, was only 18 for the Rangers. So they don't really get too hung up on age. If they feel like you're ready and you're up to the task, they'll give you the chance. I still personally would like to see Brennan Othmann start in the AHL. Let's err on the side of calling him up a little too late rather than a little too early. Let him get a little bit more development. I know he's put up those crazy numbers in the OHL. I know Ranger fans are beyond thrilled at the idea of getting a chance to see him play, and count me among you. But yeah, again, I would rather see him get a little bit of seasoning. That's quite the jump from the OHL to the NHL. So let's see what he can do with the Wolfpack. And once he hopefully starts to dominate there, you can start to have that conversation about maybe getting him up on the Rangers. And you can roll with him possibly in the Ranger lineup for the rest of the season. He also mentioned, did Chris Drury, Artemi Panarin. And obviously, we all know, how this season ended. I did that. I did. This episode hasn't dropped yet as of this recording, but we already recorded an episode with Mr. Dan Scataro, the Locked On New York Rangers Fantasy Hockey League runner-up from this past year. And I thought he made a really great point. Panarin struggled this past year in the playoffs, but nobody in the Rangers really played all that well. Obviously, Igor did. You could throw Chris Kreider in there as well. It looked like Kreider was just going to go on a rampage throughout the entire playoffs. Had some big games, but even he was quiet for some games as well. But bottom line, nobody on the Rangers, other than those two maybe, really played all that great in the playoffs. And this is what Chris Drury had to say about Artemi Panarin. Artemi is a world-class player, and anyone who knows him personally knows what a great person he is. I know he did express some frustration at breakup day, and I know he's worked extremely hard this summer on his mental and physical game and trying to have another terrific regular season to get another crack in the playoffs. I think he's itching for it and wants to have a good playoff. And to kind of build on what Drury's saying there and kind of just my takeaway from this, if the Rangers get back to the playoffs this year, which I think is pretty likely, there's no guarantees. We said that even after their run to the Eastern Conference final 2 years ago, there were no guarantees that would happen again this past year, the Rangers getting back to the playoffs. But I think you look at the roster, you look at the team they have in place, you look at the talent there, I think this probably is a playoff team. And if they do get back, there may not be any player, not just on the Rangers, but possibly in the entire NHL, who will be facing as much scrutiny and under as much of a microscope as Artemi Panarin for the forthcoming Stanley Cup playoffs. Because, obviously a really rough showing this past year. 2 years ago, played well, but, a lot of turnovers and some indecisiveness, had a lot of points. But we haven't seen the best of Artemi Panarin in the playoffs with the New York Rangers. Now, there's other guys that are going to be under scrutiny as well. Connor McDavid, still looking for his first Stanley Cup. But he's put up some really big numbers in the playoffs. So even him, I don't think he'd be under as much scrutiny and face as much criticism as Artemi Panarin would if Artemi Panarin has another lackluster playoff showing. Austin Matthews is another. The Leafs never get out of the first round until this past year. But he's put up good numbers in the playoffs as well. I think Panarin is going to be the guy, not just among Ranger fans, but general hockey fans that just love the playoffs, which, that's every hockey fan. They're going to be keeping an eye on Artemi Panarin and seeing what he can do in the playoffs this season. But I think it's good that, per Drury here, Artemi Panarin is embracing that challenge. He wants to get back. He wants to get another opportunity, put his best foot forward in the playoffs, and be one of the main reasons why the Rangers hopefully go on a deep run and possibly even a Stanley Cup run this upcoming season. Glad to see Chris Drury sticking by his guy here. The other thing that I'll mention real quick as far as takeaways from Chris Drury, he mentioned he does anticipate the Rangers sending anybody to a PTO, which is interesting. It sounds like he's pretty content with the players they have and the roster that they have, and it does look like they pretty much have their team going into opening night. It was interesting to hear that, though, because, Jimmy Vesey was on a PTO this past year. Obviously, that worked out. He made the team. For a while, was playing on the Rangers' top line. And even when he wasn't, a solid bottom six, mostly fourth line player, was Jimmy Vesey. And then Ben Harper, PTO with the Hartford Wolfpack. He ends up making that team and playing in a good amount of games for the Rangers this past season as well. So we'll see. That can always change. But as of now, per Chris Drury, he doesn't anticipate any PTOs for the New York Rangers going into training camp here. So going to keep everything rolling in just a second. Want to get to game one between the Rangers and Flyers. The Ranger rookies once again taking down the Flyer rookies by a final score of 4-2 just a short time ago. It's very late on Friday night here, but that game wrapped up not too long ago. And I want to discuss that and who stood out for the Rangers in that game. We'll do that in just a second. All right, so the Rangers beat the Flyers. It always feels good to say that. I don't care if it's, this isn't even the preseason, really. This is a game among, rookies for both teams. And for the Rangers, I'm pretty sure that none of their players have played in the NHL. Looking at the roster, eyeballing the roster real quick before I hit record here. The Flyers have a couple of guys that have played a couple of games in the NHL, but for the most part, very young players and obviously an exciting time for both teams to see their guys in action. The thing I love about, there's a lot of things I love about this, but this is a hockey game. This is Rangers versus Flyers. In every sense of the word, I realize this is not going to be the opening night roster for either of these two teams when the NHL season begins. But, they go with the authentic Ranger jerseys, the Flyer jerseys. They're playing at the PPL Center in Allentown, which I'm pretty sure, without looking this up, is the AHL affiliate of the Flyers. That's their home arena there. The arena wasn't exactly packed, but there was a decent amount of fans there and a couple of Ranger fans as well. You could see some blue kind of dotting the crowd there, the audience. And I got to say, I tweeted this out earlier today. Thank you to the Philadelphia Flyers because the Rangers really did not cover this in any way. They didn't have any, broadcast going on there. The Flyers did. They streamed it on their website and we were able to watch. They had announcers there as well. It was great. I just really enjoyed watching it. Obviously, there was only the one camera. It was basically the hard camera that you see, the standard camera for, every NHL game that you watched. There weren't any replays or anything like that, but for what this was, I very much enjoyed it. As far as the starting lineup for the Rangers, the forwards, you had left to right Sikora, Henriksen, and Othman. The defensemen were Robertson and Petrovsky. And in goal for the Rangers was Dylan Garand. Good night for a lot of these guys. Othman drew a penalty for the first power play of the game. He also had a primary assist a little bit later in the game. I believe that was the second period. Adam Sikora drew a penalty in the second period, was really going to work in the corner, and then the Rangers ended up scoring on that power play. Robertson ended up, he's going to be under some scrutiny. And, I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but let's just talk about it right now. Matthew Robertson kind of, maybe this might be too strong of a term, but possibly at a little bit of a crossroads with the Rangers right now. Molly Walker did an article on Matthew Robertson a little bit earlier this week, and it basically was just kind of tracking his progression within the Ranger organization and just kind of noting the fact that a lot of defensemen have basically kind of leapfrogged Matthew Robertson. He was a second-round draft pick. We've been hearing about how the Rangers like him and how, eventually he's going to get his turn. But that hasn't happened. And you guys know as well as I do, the revolving door that the Rangers have had over the past couple seasons as far as their defensemen are concerned. Off the top of my head, I'm not going to remember everybody, but everybody from like Patrick Nemeth to Libor Hayek to Zach Jones to Justin Braun to Nico Mikkola to Ben Harper, all these guys in and out of the lineup, all different shapes and sizes. And some guys are young, some guys are old, some guys are prospects, some guys are rentals. But we have not seen Matthew Robertson with the New York Rangers. And, by all accounts, it sounds like he's not really lighting the world on fire with Hartford. So this is going to be, this is a big 2-game set for him here against the Flyers to kind of improve his stock a little bit. Going to be a big season for him with the Hartford Wolfpack as well. And we'll see if we end up seeing him with the Rangers at some point this season. But I think this could be a very, very important season for Matthew Robertson. He's not like ancient or anything. I think he's still just 22. But I think, when they drafted him, the Rangers, that is, by now, I think they would have expected him to probably make his debut. And imagine, going back a couple of years here, and you draft Matthew Robertson in the second round, and you're told that, oh yeah, we're going to have Ben Harper in the lineup before we see Matthew Robertson. That would have been a tough sell. And that's nothing against Ben Harper. I like what he did for the Rangers this past season. But Robertson, obviously, you would have expected to see him before, a journeyman such as Ben Harper. Somebody else that I want to really kind of give some props to is Dylan Garand. I thought he was fantastic in this game. And he's another guy. This is an important season for Dylan Garand for the Rangers, former 4th-round pick by the Rangers. And, the Rangers right now, obviously Igor Shesterkin is the man. I don't think anybody's going to contest that as far as who should be the starting goalie for the Rangers. But we've seen the past couple of seasons here, different backup goalie in all of the past 3 seasons. It was Alex Georgiev. Rangers couldn't afford him anymore. And Georgia wanted and deserved a chance to start. Rangers trade him to Colorado. They go with Yaroslav Halak last year on a 1-year deal, veteran backup goalie. And now Jonathan Quick, veteran who is transitioning into being a backup goalie this season. But at what point, might it be Dylan Garand's turn to be on the NHL roster and back up Igor Shesterkin? We'll see when that happens. Doesn't look like it's going to happen this season. But this past year, Garand, kind of a little bit of a lackluster showing for the Wolfpack. His numbers were not great this past season, but one thing working in his favor, he was outstanding in the playoffs for the Hartford Wolfpack. So that's a good sign that he can be at his best when the lights are their brightest, and obviously that he's got talent. And like I said, he was fantastic in this game. We're going to get to some of his better saves as we kind of go through the game here. But yeah, I just want to take you guys, through the game here. Look at some of the highlights for the Rangers and just kind of add my comments along the way. It was a physical, tough, spirited game. And like I said, a come from behind win for the New York Rangers. I thought the Flyers had the better of play in the first period, but the Rangers basically hit the ground running in the second and never looked back and went on to get this victory here. It was also tied going into the third, so always nice to see your team win a game when it's tied going into the third period. But Garand set the tone for himself very early in this game. Tyson Forrester, big prospect for the Philadelphia Flyers. He had a one-timer from the left circle. He was wide open on this play, and Garand with a great job sliding to his right, kind of sprawling to make the save. And then not too long after this, made another save on the rush and a right shoulder save during a Philly power play early in this game. We had our first skirmish not too long after this. Brett Berard, who's fast becoming one of my favorite kind of dark horse Ranger prospects. I do think there's something there. He played very well in this game. Not the biggest guy, but a very scrappy, very gritty player. And I don't see him being a superstar in the NHL, but honestly, and I'm not a scout or anything, but the little I've seen of him between like World Juniors, the Wolf Pack, and even tonight's game here, it does kind of seem like he's somebody that could be a bottom six forward in the NHL and have some success doing it. So he was good, but he was right in the middle of the first skirmish because that's just the kind of game that he played. There was also play later in this game where he showed some really good burst up the center of the ice, almost got behind everyone. The Philly defenseman made a really nice play to kind of cut him off, but I was impressed overall by Brett Berard in this game. We also had Matt Rempe getting into a fight with Wisdom of the Philadelphia Flyers. Apparently, these two got into a fight during this series last year. They even kind of came together at the end of this game. Were jawing at each other a little bit, but Rempe won this fight. He took an early punch, but then landed a big one, knocked Wisdom to the ice. There's a little bit of blood on the ice as well. So Rempe won this fight, even though it didn't last very long. Matthew Robertson made a nice defensive play. There was a situation where the Flyers stole the puck from the Rangers. They were going in on the rush, and Matthew Robertson was the only defenseman back. So he moved quickly to his right to the other side of the ice, cut the play off, kind of short-circuited a rush for the Flyers there. So that was nice to see. Again, Matthew Robertson's going to be a big season for him, presumably starting with the Hartford Wolfpack. Flyers went up 1-0. Even here, Garand made a bunch of awesome saves. Flyers won a face-off in the offensive zone, immediately got a chance. Garand with the great point-blank save. Right after this, he made another save on a deflection chance for the Flyers. He stopped that one as well. And then the rebound was buried. So 3 high-quality, grade A scoring chances for the Flyers. Garand stopped the first 2. Couldn't stop the third one, but that's okay. He played an outstanding game regardless. We had another skirmish at the end of the period here. Rempe was right in the middle of it. He was very noticeable in this game as well, obviously getting into the fight and mixing it up. Some extracurriculars after the whistle. We go to the second period. Rangers, I mentioned this earlier, Sakura draws a penalty, and the Rangers have a power play that's basically their starting lineup, but Sakura in there rather than the second defenseman. Matthew Robertson was the lone defenseman on the ice for this. But kind of a fluky goal here. Henriksen was trying to pass. It got tipped like really, really high into the air and just kind of fluttered down over the shoulder of the goalie. I don't think the goalie even knew where it was or saw the puck and just went into the net. So fluky goal, but they all count 1-1 at that point. We get some more nastiness. You've got Wisdom, who I mentioned got into a fight earlier in this game. He drives hard to the net. He's got a Ranger on him, crashes into Dylan Garand. Big get together behind the net, a lot of pushing and shoving. Rubrick and Robertson both in there for the Rangers, but Robertson was actually called for a penalty on this one. So yeah, Flyers got the power play opportunity, but the Rangers able to kill it off. And then Rubrick actually ended up scoring a goal. Great team effort here, just kind of a blue-collar goal for the Rangers. Great job by Maxime Barbashev as well as Sandhill Penoir, all applying pressure. Rempe was in there as well. And then Penoir, a great pass out of the corner to Rubrick. He scores from the high slot, and the Rangers go up 2-1. A little bit less than 5 minutes to go in the second period. Flyers ended up tying it late in the second period, about 30 seconds remaining. That made it 2-2 going into the third. But then we get to the third period, and there's my guy, Brett Berard again. Again, I am becoming a bigger and bigger fan of him. He's kind of my dark horse, kind of my underdog that I'm really having a fun time rooting for the more and more that I see of him. But again, still tied at 2-2, and about midway through the third period here, Berard prevents a clear. He's kind of against the boards, and he prevents the puck from getting out, plays it up the boards. He eventually gets it back in the corner, makes a great pass out of the corner in front to Ryder Korzak. Korzak's all alone in front of the net. He buries it, 3-2 Rangers. They're on top for good at this point. Getting into the final couple of minutes here, big scramble in front of the Ranger net. Garand had to kind of fight off a changeup and then a couple stuff-in tries by the Flyers as well. Garand was really, really good in this game. I was really encouraged by what I saw from him. I would imagine that, in the second of these two games, it's probably going to be one of the other goalies rather than Garand. Garand played this entire game, and again, I thought he was outstanding. But the Rangers also have Talon Boyko as well as Olaf Lindbaum in camp. I would imagine one of them will start that game. Maybe the other one comes in relief. I don't think that they would go through this whole camp. I mean, they only have 3 goalies, so I would imagine that all 3 of them will get a chance to play at some point. But I'm glad that Garand not only started this game but also finished it, and like I said, played very, very well for the Rangers. Flyers pull their goalie, still down 3-2, 1:42 to go, and Matthew Robertson with bizarre empty net goal. Anybody that saw this, you know what I'm talking about. He scores with 1:02 to go in the game. But basically, Robertson, he's in his own zone. He lifts it out of the Ranger zone, one of those where you clear the puck and you're looking to, avoid the icing and also avoid having one of the Flyers, keep the puck in the zone. So he lifts it out of the zone, and you've got Bobby Brink, a big prospect for the Flyers. He's back in the Flyer zone. The puck's coming down to him. Puts his glove up in the air. He's going to glove it and put it down, but it bounces right off his glove, keeps going, trickles into the net, and it's 4-2 Rangers. And that is your final score. And as I mentioned, there was a skirmish at the end of this game during the final horn. McCleary was in there for the Rangers, as was Bobby Trevino. And as I already mentioned, I also had Rempe and Wisdom once again chirping at each other after they fought earlier in this game, and apparently also fought during this series last year. So keep an eye on the 2 of them for the second of these 2 games on Saturday. But like I said, jam-packed episode. Glad we got through everything. I was really, really excited to record this. Like I said, it's very late on Friday night, but figure we can call it there. Once again, thank you guys as always for tuning in to the Locked On New York Ranger podcast, your team every day. If you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, at @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, this at @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.